When I was 10, I moved in with my dad. I didn't know anyone in the area, except for a family he was friends with, a single mother raising 3 kids on her own. One of them was a girl, 12 years old at the time. We weren't that close, but over the years, we ended up having the same group of friends. Then came that night, the night everything changed. My friend Rob was hanging out with her and her little brother. They were home alone since their mom was working late. Her mom had been helping a woman through her job, someone she had grown close to. But what she didn't know was that this woman had a sister who had just been released from a mental institution. That night, there was a knock at the door. It was a familiar knock, the kind their mom used when coming home. So, my friend didn't hesitate. She opened the door without a second thought. Rob, who wasn't supposed to be there, panicked. He slipped out through the window and ran home. He never looked back, never questioned it. But that was a mistake, because the person at the door wasn't her mom. It was the sister, the one from the institution. She had learned everything where the family lived. When their mom would be gone, she knew the house would be empty. And the moment she stepped inside, the nightmare began. The little brother somehow managed to escape, running to the neighbors to call the police. But my friend, she wasn't so lucky. What happened next was beyond horror. A week before Christmas, she was brutally murdered. But not just murdered, decapitated. Her lifeless, naked body was left in the bathtub. And her head? It was missing. The police searched everywhere, inside cabinets, under furniture, even through the wrapped Christmas presents. And eventually, they found it. I wasn't allowed to go to her funeral. Maybe that was a blessing. But one thing is certain, I will never forget that night. About 15 years ago, back when my wife and I were still dating, something truly terrifying happened to her grandmother. Her husband had passed away a year earlier. To keep herself busy, she started volunteering at the local library, something to pass the time, to be around people. But little did she know, this simple routine would nearly cost her life. It was winter. The library closed at 5 p.m., but she had stayed behind a little longer. She was offered a ride home, but she turned it down. "I need the exercise," she said. It was just a mile home, a short walk through a lightly wooded area in South Texas. What could possibly go wrong? But that night, she wasn't alone. Halfway home, she noticed a man behind her, walking in the same direction, gaining on her. At first, she brushed it off, but then he sped up. Then he was right behind her. And then he matched her pace. She could feel his breath on her neck. A chill ran down her spine. Something was very, very wrong. But she was almost home. She could see her driveway up ahead. She had left the lights on, so it would look like someone was inside. She just had to make it a little further. 150 yards. 150. And then, it happened. A strong hand clamped down on her shoulder. "Don't turn around. Give me your purse, or I'll cut you." That was it. The moment of truth. She froze. Took a slow, steady breath. Then, in one swift motion, she stepped forward, spun around, and shot him in the neck with the .38 she kept in her purse. The man collapsed. He survived, but spent the next 5 years in a prison hospital. Eventually, he died from complications. Her grandmother lived for many more years. But until the day she passed, she always said the same thing: "I pulled the trigger too soon." I was 11 years old at the time. My sister, who was 7 years older than me, would babysit when our parents were out. She smoked a lot back then, and since our parents didn't allow her to smoke inside, she always had to go out. Naturally, I would tag along, running around, playing, and annoying her like any little brother would. But then, things took a strange turn. One evening, my sister noticed a white SUV parked at the end of our driveway, just sitting there, watching. It had a bike rack on top and the darkest tinted windows I had ever seen. You couldn't see a thing inside. It didn't move until my sister went inside. Then, slowly, it would roll down the street, pulling into the church parking lot nearby. And wait, the next time she stepped out for a smoke, it came back. Again and again. At first, it seemed odd, but my sister wasn't easily scared. She brushed it off until the next night, when it happened again. Every time she stepped outside, the SUV was there, watching. I didn't know who was inside, but I knew they were watching my sister. Sometimes, I wouldn't go out. Instead, I would peek through the front window, watching them watch her. My sister finally told our dad, who was a sheriff's deputy at the time. He called the police and filed a complaint. They came, looked around, but the SUV was gone. Months passed. Nothing happened. And then, out of nowhere 9 months later, it came back. It became a regular thing. One night, my sister had had enough. She went outside as usual, and sure enough, the SUV appeared. But this time, she wasn't going to ignore it. She told me to stay in the carport. She was going to confront them. She started walking down the driveway, heading straight for the SUV. But then, something happened. She later told us that halfway down the driveway, her body just locked up. I felt it, she said. If I took another step, I was dead. I knew it. I felt it in my bones. A paralyzing fear washed over her. She turned around and walked back inside. The SUV stayed there. That night, our family car was in the shop, so we were all stuck at home. My parents were inside. My sister went out for a smoke, and it came back. She told me to run inside and tell Dad. I did. My dad, without hesitation, grabbed his gun. He marched down the driveway, weapon in hand. Not pointed, not yet. But whoever was in that SUV knew exactly what was coming. And then, the engine roared to life. The SUV tore down the road, screeching onto the highway, disappearing into the night. My dad, ever the cop, took note of the make, model, and distinguishing features.